Most people misunderstand those who have few friends or none at all. They rush to label them, to name them, because once you've explained someone, you don't have to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. A label makes the story easier to tell, easier to swallow. But there's a quiet truth hiding beneath the surface of human life. The ones who walk alone, the ones with a small circle, the ones who sometimes have no one at all, are not defective. They aren't strange, they aren't missing something. In many cases, they're carrying a rare inner fire the world has never learned how to understand, because the world is too loud to recognize anything that doesn't beg for attention. Carl Jung believed that the deeper a person returns to their own soul, the smaller their social circle becomes. Not because they reject the world and not because they're trying to be different, but because their spirit begins to vibrate at a level ordinary connections can't reach. Most people never discover who they truly are. They hide behind noise, behind groups, behind the comfort of being constantly surrounded, just so they never have to face themselves in the silence. But the ones who stand apart, the ones who walk their own path, are doing something far more courageous. They are meeting themselves, and today you're going to discover why having few friends is not a sign of weakness. It's often a sign of advancement, a mind that refuses to be shaped by the crowd, a psyche that won't trade its inner compass for social approval, a soul that values truth more than belonging. And if you're the kind of person with few friends, your nervous system may be designed for depth. You don't just experience life, you process it. You don't just meet people, you sense them. Your first rare trait is authenticity. Realness you cannot manufacture, even when pretending would make your life smoother, easier, more socially successful. Most people can wear a persona for years and barely notice the cost. Jung called the persona the social mask, the version of you engineered to be acceptable, to be liked, to be safe inside a group. And to a degree, everyone has one. It's adaptive. It's how you navigate first impressions, workplaces, strangers, dinner tables where honesty would start a war. But if you have few friends, or none, your psyche often refuses to live there for long. You can do small talk, you can fit in, but your body keeps the receipts. The cost is private. It's paid in fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. In a strange numbness after socializing, like you left the room but forgot to bring your soul back with you. In that quiet, accumulating self-betrayal that builds when you keep translating yourself into a more convenient version until your spirit starts to feel like it's living in a borrowed body. This is the moment authenticity stops being a preference and becomes a need. So truth becomes your natural filter. Not truth as in I'm right, not truth as in winning debates or proving points. Truth as in I will not distort myself to keep the room comfortable. You stop laughing at jokes that feel cruel just because everyone else is laughing. You stop nodding along to opinions that violate your values just to avoid tension. And you stop calling people friends when the connection is built on performance contracts, where you must stay light, easy, entertaining, useful, or you lose your place. This is where your circle begins to shrink. Not because you became cold, not because you became antisocial, but because friendships built on persona cannot survive your honesty. When you become real, superficial bonds don't always explode. They evaporate, they fade, they quietly dissolve like fog when the sun rises, because fog can only exist when the air stays cold. And at first, that's painful, because you start realizing something that changes how you see people forever. Many groups don't reject you because you're bad. They react because your authenticity exposes the unspoken agreement everyone else is following. Your presence becomes inconvenient. Not because you're judging them, but because you're not playing along. And this is where you need a reframe that protects your self-worth. If your circle shrinks as you become more honest, it doesn't mean you're failing at connection. It means you're changing the standard for for what connection is. You're no longer impressed by proximity. You're no longer satisfied by familiarity. You're no longer soothed by the illusion of belonging when the price is self-abandonment. You start craving what most people avoid: sincerity, depth, emotional accuracy. You want relationships where you can be a human being, not a role, where you can have a bad day without being punished, where you can tell the truth without being treated like you ruined the vibe. So yes, your circle shrinks, but what's really happening is refinement, like a sculptor carving away stone that can't hold the shape. Now here's the shadow test, because every gift has a threshold, and authenticity is no exception. If you've been forced to wear a mask for too long, the moment you take it off can feel like liberation. And liberation can make you careless. Your truth can become sharp. Not because you're cruel, because you're relieved, because you're finally speaking after years of swallowing. So ask yourself, is your truth making you clearer or making you harder? Healthy authenticity doesn't just reveal what's real, it preserves what's human. It doesn't use being real as permission to stop being kind. Jung would call this integration, when the self holds both honesty and heart, both clarity and compassion. And here's where it turns. Your authenticity isn't just a personality trait, it's a psychological boundary. And boundaries do something dangerous. They reveal who was only there for the mask. The second trait is inner sovereignty, an independence so deep it doesn't announce itself. It simply stands. You don't rely on the crowd to feel real. You don't need constant mirrors to confirm you exist. When your phone is quiet, you don't automatically spiral into, what did I do? What do they think? Am I being left behind? You can sit in stillness and feel intact. For some people, that sounds cold. For you, it feels like oxygen. Now let's be honest. Many people are regulated through social approval. Their nervous system settles when others validate them. They feel anchored when they're included, praised, remembered, invited. There is no shame in that. Humans are wired for belonging. We are mammals. We survive through connection. But your psyche learned a different method, standing alone without collapsing. And sometimes, yes, it's earned through pain. Maybe you learned early that support was inconsistent, that people didn't show up the way they promised, that "I'll be there" didn't mean anything when the moment arrived. And your nervous system adapted the way every intelligent system adapts. It studied the pattern and built a defense. Dependence is risky. Self-reliance is safer. You became the person who handles it, the one who figures it out, the one who doesn't ask twice. Not because you were born fearless, but because asking and being ignored trains the heart to stop reaching. Other times, it's not trauma, it's temperament. Some people are simply built with a deeply introverted architecture. Their energy moves inward, not outward. They process in solitude. They restore in quiet. They don't feel deprived without constant social stimulation. They feel clearer. They're like a deep-sea creature, more alive in depth than on the surface. Either way, something begins to form inside you, an inner throne, a center, a private axis, a psychological backbone the world can't easily knock you off of. This is why you can spend time alone without panic, why you can miss events and not feel like you're dying, why you can walk through your days without needing to be witnessed to feel valid, why you can be quiet and still feel full. This is inner sovereignty, the ability to belong to yourself. And Jung would say this is a sign of individuation, the slow shift from being governed by the collective to being guided by an inner law. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop letting the room decide who you are. You become less reactive to approval and less terrified of disapproval because your identity is no longer a public vote. But here's the part people romanticize too quickly. inner sovereignty has a shadow, because the more you can survive alone, the more you start believing you should. This is where the trait turns. Quietly, you begin to confuse I can with I must. You start treating connection like weakness. You start feeling suspicious of needing anyone, as if needing is the same as failing. You turn self-sufficiency into identity, and then intimacy begins to feel foreign, like a language you once spoke fluently but forgot through disuse. You may even start wearing independence like armor. I don't need anything. I'm fine. And sometimes you are fine, but sometimes fine is a polite word for walled off, because the truth is, the human heart doesn't just want survival. It wants safe closeness. It wants to exhale around someone. It wants to be held without being handled. And here's what most people miss. Your independence is powerful, but if it becomes pride, it will quietly lock you out of the very thing you secretly still want: closeness that doesn't cost you yourself. So the task isn't to become dependent again. The task is to become sovereign and connected, to let your inner throne remain yours while still allowing the right people to sit at your table. Trait 3 is sacred selectivity. You don't open your doors to everyone, not because you think you're superior, but because you've become sensitive to what enters your inner world. And if you're honest, this sensitivity isn't theoretical, it's physical. You can feel it in your chest when someone's nice feels strategic. You can feel it in your stomach when a compliment has hooks in it. You can feel it in your nervous system when a conversation is actually an extraction. You notice energy, intention, the invisible price of being around someone. Some people cost you your nervous system because you're always subtly bracing, always monitoring their mood, always reading between the lines. Some people cost you your clarity because they flood you with noise, drama, gossip, chaos, and you can't hear yourself think for hours afterward. And once you've paid those prices enough times, you stop spending blindly. That's what selectivity really is, an evolved relationship with cost. Most people choose friends the way they choose entertainment. They choose what feels fun, what looks good, what helps their image, what fills the room so they don't have to feel alone. You choose differently. You choose by aftermath. How do I feel after I leave them? Do I feel more like myself or less? Do I feel nourished or contaminated? Jung would say this is as psyche developing discernment, because the psyche is not only trying to connect, it's trying to protect the self. And when you've had enough experiences where connection required self-erasure, your inner system gets stricter, not meaner, stricter. This is where other people misunderstand you. They think you're aloof. They think you're difficult. They think you judge, but what they call judgment is often discernment, the ability to sense the difference between someone who wants connection and someone who wants access, because there are people who love you, and there are people who love what they can extract from you: your attention, your empathy, your advice, your availability, your emotional labor, your softness, your willingness to forgive, your tendency to overgive. Some people aren't drawn to you because they see you. They're drawn to you because they can use you like a resource. And if you have few friends, you may have learned that difference the hard way. Maybe you were the therapist friend, the one everyone dumped on, then disappeared when you needed anything real. Maybe you were the reliable one, always showing up, always making space, always forgiving. And maybe one day your nervous system finally said, "We are not doing this anymore." So you become selective. You'd rather have one bond that is clean than 10 bonds that require you to perform. You'd rather have silence than shallow loyalty. You'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who drain you while smiling. And here's the part that's hard to explain to people who don't live with your sensitivity. You're not avoiding people. You're avoiding the version of yourself you become around the wrong people. That's sacred selectivity. It's the refusal to hand your inner world to anyone who hasn't earned the privilege. But like the other traits, this has a shadow too, because selectivity can harden into suspicion. Discernment can become a permanent closed door. Your ability to sense red flags can turn into scanning for danger even when there is none. You can start treating every new person like a future disappointment. The line is thin, wisdom on one side, isolation on the other. So the task is to remain selective without becoming sealed, to keep your standards high, but your heart alive. The point of a gate is not to never open. The point is to open deliberately. Now watch this. Your selectivity will look like loneliness from the outside, but from the inside it is often the beginning of self-respect. Because the moment you stop giving everyone access, you stop abandoning yourself. And for the first time, your solitude isn't a punishment. It's a boundary with dignity. Trait 4 is introspection. Your silence isn't blank, it's diagnostic. To most people, silence feels like an empty room. To you, it feels like a lab, a sanctuary, a confessional without a priest, a place where the psyche finally stops performing and starts telling the truth. Many people fear being alone because the mind gets loud. The moment the noise of the world disappears, the inner world begins. Memories, regrets, cravings, grief, anger, old conversations that return like ghosts. Most people treat that inner noise as a threat, so they drown it out. They stay busy, they stay social, they stay entertained, they call it a life. But you, over time, learn to sit inside the noise until it becomes information. You begin to ask a different question, not how do I escape this feeling, but what is this feeling trying to tell me? Jung would say, you are developing a relationship with the unconscious, the deeper psychic layer that communicates through symbols, patterns, dreams, impulses, repeating themes. The unconscious rarely speaks in clear sentences. It speaks in moods, in coincidences, in attractions you can't explain, in the strange heaviness you feel around certain people and the strange lightness you feel when you finally tell the truth. So you don't just have emotions, you investigate them. You look for the root, you trace the pattern. You ask what this moment is trying to teach you about the architecture of your own psyche, and this is where your social life changes in a way most people don't understand. Because most friendships, most of the time, are built on distraction, shared activities, shared gossip, shared avoidance, a mutual agreement to stay on the surface and call it connection. But your psyche doesn't want avoidance anymore, it wants integration. Integration is what happens when you stop splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. So you start noticing your shadow, the parts you were taught to hide, soften, shrink, deny. The anger that makes you too much, the need that makes you too sensitive, the ambition that makes you selfish, the grief that makes you heavy, the softness that makes you easy to hurt. And instead of exiling these parts, you bring them into consciousness. You look at them directly, not to romanticize them, not to excuse bad behavior, but to understand what they are protecting, what they are hungry for, what they were formed to survive. This process is heavy, it demands energy, it demands honesty, it demands time, and it slows your social appetite. Because when you're integrating shadow, you can't tolerate environments that require you to stay superficial. You can't laugh your way out of what you're finally facing. You can't drink your way into forgetting. You can't keep it light when your inner world is in the middle of a reckoning. So you begin to prefer fewer people, because fewer people can hold that level of reality. It's not that you think you're deeper than others, it's that your nervous system is no longer interested in paying for connection with self-abandonment. And here's another quiet consequence. Introspection makes you harder to manipulate, because once you've learned your own patterns, you start recognizing them in real time. You notice when you're about to people please. You notice when you're about to abandon your needs to keep peace. You notice when you're craving approval because an old wound is asking for a familiar hit. Introspection is the moment you stop being a mystery to yourself. And that changes everything, especially who you allow close. This is why your friendships can feel rare. You're not collecting people, you're curating an inner climate. You're protecting the work happening inside you. And many social spaces, without meaning to, interfere with that work. They ask you to stay the same because your depth makes them uncomfortable. And here's where it turns what people call overthinking might actually be you building the one thing most humans never build, self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is not just insight, it's power. Because when you know yourself, you stop begging the world to define you. You stop needing constant companionship to feel whole. And you begin to understand why your circle is small. Not because you are defective, but because your inner world has become too valuable to hand out casually. The fifth trait is growth, evolution forged through solitude. You mature because at some point you had no choice but to meet yourself. When you walk without a crowd, you stop outsourcing identity. There is no group to mirror you back to yourself, no constant feedback loop telling you who to be, how to act. What version of you is acceptable today? So something deeper is forced to develop. An inner reference point, a private compass, a sense of self that does not depend on applause. It's like climbing a mountain alone. From below, life looks frantic. People run in circles, chasing approval, chasing status, chasing the appearance of being normal. From above, the movement looks different. Patterns emerge. You begin to see which pursuits are driven by desire and which are driven by fear. From that height, certain truths become impossible to ignore. You realize how many friendships are maintained not by intimacy, but by anxiety. Fear of being left out, fear of being misunderstood, fear of standing alone with one's own thoughts. You see how often people stay connected, not because the bond is nourishing, but because disconnection feels terrifying. And then another realization lands quietly but firmly. A crowded life can still be a lonely life if no one truly knows you. This is where your evolution accelerates, because without constant social reinforcement, you're forced to build something more durable. You learn how to regulate your own emotions, how to sit with uncertainty, how to soothe yourself without numbing, how to make decisions without polling the room. You stop waiting for permission to become who you are. This is how you become anti-fragile, not hardened, not closed. Anti-fragile, stronger through stress, clearer through challenge. Solitude doesn't shrink you, it tempers you. It burns away what is performative and leaves behind what is essential. And paradoxically, this kind of growth does make you attractive, eventually. Not to everyone, and that's the point. It attracts people who don't need you to perform. People who are not threatened by your depth. People who can meet you as a peer rather than as an audience. People who don't need you to stay small so they can feel comfortable. But there is a warning here, one that matters. Growth can quietly turn into arrogance if you're not careful. When you've done deep inner work, it's tempting to look at those who haven't and feel impatient. To see their reactivity, their avoidance, their dependency, and think, I'm beyond this. And the moment you do that, you trade wisdom for isolation, because growth is not about standing above humanity. It's about understanding it without being swallowed by it. It's about compassion without self-erasure, discernment without contempt. True growth doesn't disconnect you from others. It changes how you connect. You no longer need people to validate you, but you can still choose to walk with them. You no longer cling, but you can still commit. You no longer fear being alone, but you don't worship solitude either. And here's what most people miss. The point of growth is not to become untouchable. It's to become stable enough to love without losing yourself. When that balance arrives, your life shifts again. You stop measuring success by numbers, how many friends, how many invites, how many messages. You measure it by alignment, by whether your relationships feel clean, by whether your inner world stays intact in the presence of others. And this is why people with few or no friends often carry a quiet gravity. They are not empty. They are evolving, and evolution is rarely loud. Now listen carefully, because this is where the meaning sharpens. Every one of these traits has a sacred side and a shadow side. The same qualities that protect your soul can quietly become a cage if you stop questioning them. Authenticity, when unconscious, can harden into harshness. Independence can drift into emotional exile. Selectivity can turn into avoidance. Introspection can collapse into paralysis. And growth, perhaps the most dangerous, can turn into superiority. So the real question is never, do you have few friends? The real question is this: is your solitude guiding you or governing you? Solitude as guidance refines you. It makes you clearer, more alive, more aligned with your inner truth. You return to the world steadier, not smaller. But solitude as governance slowly numbs you. It tightens your identity. Jung would call this the difference between individuation and defense. Individuation brings you closer to yourself. Defense keeps you safe by shrinking your life. And here is the final test. When you are alone, do you feel more like yourself? Or do you feel like you are hiding from being known? Because one leads to wholeness and the other only looks like peace. If you have few friends, you may not be socially broken. You may be psychologically rare, a person whose nervous system demands truth, whose spirit values inner sovereignty, whose heart has learned sacred selectivity, whose mind seeks understanding rather than distraction, and whose life keeps pressing quietly but relentlessly toward evolution. But remember this: your gifts are not meant to become armor. The goal is not to build a fortress so high that no one can reach you. The goal is to build a gate, strong enough to protect what is sacred, and wise enough to open when real connection appears. So tell me in the comments, which of these 5 traits spoke to you the most? Authenticity, inner sovereignty, sacred selectivity, introspection, or growth? Your answer might be the sentence someone else needed to read tonight. The moment they realize their quiet life isn't a failure, it's a phase of becoming. And if you want more Jungian psychology that transforms solitude into meaning, depth, and self-trust, subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but for the part of you that refuses to live behind a mask and knows there is something real waiting on the other side of silence.